Hello and welcome to Tech Deals, part 1 of the $600 AMD FX-8300 computer build video series. What is this? Why should you watch? In short, this video series is designed to answer two important questions. Number one, in 2017, is it still worth considering the AMD FX line of processors? And two, if you already own an AMD FX processor, is it worth upgrading to either a new Intel chip or AMD's upcoming Ryzen CPU? Now this is part 1, which is the parts overview. I'm going to be talking about each of these parts, why I chose them, and what use they provide. And then after this, you're going to see a build video, Windows installation and setup, Windows performance review, and then game performance. I will be comparing this CPU to both new and old Intel processors, as well as, when it comes out, the new Ryzen chips from AMD. Now, they're not launched yet. I'm filming this in February of 2017, but AMD has said that sometime in the first quarter of 2017, which is the end of March, we should see some new chips come out that will be brand new design, the first major revision of their primary desktop processors in about 4 years. So I'm actually very looking forward to that. I need to build this because I need a machine to test against the new chips, and many people own FX processors. And one of the questions I see all the time is, does it really matter? Can I use my existing FX chip? Should I upgrade to one of the new chips? Well, we're going to find out in videos to come over the next days, weeks, and months. Now, I said at the start this is a $600 build. It is, or rather it was when I bought all of these parts. Prices change all the time. Links to everything you see here will be in the video description below to both Amazon and Newegg. I highly encourage you to comparison shop between the two. Both Amazon and Newegg have excellent prices and excellent customer service. They sell everything you see here. Check out the links and buy it where it makes the most sense for you. Now, the first thing we have is our FX-8300 CPU itself. This is a 3.3 gigahertz processor that turbo boosts to 4.2. It is, however, what AMD calls their Black Edition processor, so it has an unlocked multiplier. We can overclock it beyond that. Now, there are many different models of CPUs. There's the FX-8320, 8350, and there's even some 9000 series chips. They're all basically the same processor with very, very minor changes. All of the Black Edition chips can all be overclocked basically as far as you want to go, up to 5 gigahertz. It all depends upon your cooling and how good your specific chip is. Now, this chip's about $110 and you can absolutely spend more, but you really don't need to. And so the point of this is to find out the base level 8300, how well does it overclock, and what is the value for the money. We're going to be installing this CPU today on this MSI 970 motherboard. Now, the 970 is the chipset actually on the motherboard. There are many different motherboards you can choose from. This is a very reasonably priced option. It does have great overclocking features, including MSI's Overclocking Genie, their automatic overclocking software. I'll take a look at it as well as manual overclocking. $60. It's a very reasonable price for a motherboard that supports AMD CrossFire. More about that in a minute. Now, to cool our CPU, you have a couple of options. First things first, the CPU does come with a cooler in it. You can, in a pinch, use the cooler that's in there. The cooler that's included in the box, free, should run the CPU just fine at its stock clock speeds. 3.3 gigahertz base speed, 4.2 gigahertz turbo speed. However, we want to overclock this CPU higher. Now, it's up to 5 gigahertz. I don't think we're going to get there because the cooler I've selected, which is the Corsair H55 120 millimeter liquid cooler. Why have I chosen this cooler? Well, there are many to choose from. However, for about $60, you get an entry-level liquid cooler that should run the system at a reasonable temperature while not being too loud. It will fit into most computer cases, including this one I'll talk about in a minute. And my goal here is to get to about 4.5 gigahertz. To overclock further than that, probably needs a 240 or 280 millimeter liquid cooler, but that's more expensive and it's really out of place on a $110 CPU. So we're going to give the middle of the road option a try. Another option you might consider is the Cooler Master Hyper 212 Evo. Now, this is not included in the build, it's not on the price, but it's another option you might consider. $30 for an air cooler instead of $60 for a liquid cooler. There's two reasons I did not put this in. Number one, I would like to show the difference between the smaller, less expensive liquid coolers versus the big ones I've put into other builds. And number two, this doesn't actually fit in that case very well. This is a very big, tall cooler. Let me show you what I mean. Now, it's a great cooler, but this cooler is massive. Take a look at the size of that. Take a look at the box. There's a cooler in this box. Take a look at the difference in size. This is an absolutely huge cooler. Much better cooling performance than the free stock cooler that you're provided. For $30, that is a massive cooler. Large copper heat pipes and excellent low noise 120 millimeter fan. However, it's too tall for the SPEC-01 case that I've picked. I would suggest if you want to go with an air cooler, swap the case out for a Cooler Master MasterBox 5. They're about $60 or $10 more than this, but you save money on the cooler, and then you can go with one of these. I will one of these days actually install that air cooler onto something, but in this particular case, I'm going with the H55. For system memory, we have 8 gigabytes of DDR3 RAM. Now, the choice between 8 and 16 gigabytes is a personal preference. In a $600 build, I can certainly understand why some people would go with 8. I will do tests with both 8 and 16 in the future to show whether or not it really makes a difference in general gaming performance. I believe in 2017, 16 is the preferred amount, but in the $600 budget, something would have to give if we put it in, so we're going with 8 gigabytes of RAM. Now, the nice thing is this motherboard has 4 memory slots, so you can buy 2 memory modules and get 8 gigabytes now, and then add 8 gigabytes more in the future by simply buying 2 more memory modules and installing them. That's a nice thing. Next up is our storage. I have a Samsung 750 EVO, not an 850, a 750, 250 gigabyte solid state drive. This is going to be the boot drive in this machine. It's about $15 less expensive than an 850 EVO and a little bit slower, but in a machine such as this, you shouldn't notice. It's a good value for the money. Now, if you don't want to or can't for whatever reason go with a Samsung drive, then a Crucial MX300, an ADATA SP550, a PNY drive. There are many other really good choices you can choose, but I had this one and so I went with it. They're all going to be in about the $70 to $75 price range for a 250 gigabyte class solid state drive. You will notice there is no hard drive in this build. Now, I'm assuming one of two things. One, you don't care and you're either happy with this, or you want to spend $30 or $40 more and get a 500 gig SSD, or you already have a hard drive to use from a previous system and thus don't need one. If you need a hard drive, you can buy 1 terabyte hard drives for about $50 or so. You can certainly add it to the price. I'm not putting it in here because I'm trying to stick to the $600 price point, so solid state drive. Please note, for the same price as this 250 gigabyte drive, you could buy a 2 terabyte hard drive. The Seagate Barracuda, for example, is a 7200 RPM hard drive for $70. So you can remove this and replace it with a hard drive if space is more important to you than speed. Next, let's talk about the graphics card. We have the AMD RX 480 4 gigabyte graphics card for a $600 machine. That is a lot of graphics card. This graphics card will basically play any current game in 2017 at 1080p full HD resolution at an average of high detail at an average of 60 frames per second. Now let me be very clear about that statement. I am not claiming that this card will play every game at max ultra detail with every single detail cranked to the max with a minimum frame rate of 60. Those are two very different statements. It will, however, play all current games with high detail in most cases. Many will play at ultra, most will play at high, a few will need medium, with an average frame rate, not a minimum, of 60 frames per second. You'd need 2 of them in order to make it minimum 60 or max ultra detail, and 2 of them is an option. This motherboard supports CrossFire, and you can buy 2 of these and install them in this motherboard, or buy 1 now, and 6 months to a year from now when they're cheaper on sale or you can find a used one, buy a second one, add it to the system to gain more graphics performance. Now this particular card is the MSI Gaming X factory overclocked card. They make several different versions of this. The Armor OC is the white and black version with a slightly smaller cooler on it, and then they also make blower style coolers and some other cards. And MSI is not the only brand. XFX, Asus, and others make excellent RX 480s, so by all means buy one of those if it's your preferred brand. In my experience, the performance difference between various brands of cards is fairly minor. So long as it's an RX 480 from somebody, it'll be plus or minus 5–10% within the same performance bracket. Very good value for the money. And that brings us to our computer case. This is the Corsair SPEC-01 $50 mid-tower computer case. It is an excellent option at a reasonable budget price. You can get computer cases for less than this. There are some computer cases on Amazon and Newegg for under $30. I don't recommend you use them. The first problem you run into is they're very cheaply built with very thin metal. They're also not powder coated inside, so when you're working inside the case, it's just bare aluminum. They also tend to have sharp edges inside. You can cut your hands pretty easily. There's no protection from anything contacting the bare metal surfaces. Spend an extra $20 and get yourself a nice quality case with thicker metal, with a nice side window. It includes an intake fan in the front. It's a better value for the money than the $30 cases, in my opinion. If by chance you want something that looks different than this case, my alternative choice would be the Cooler Master MasterBox 5. Now, I mentioned this before and I used it recently in my i7 Kaby Lake build. It's a $60 case, so it's about $10 more than this. It's a little bit taller, it's a little bit wider, and a little bit deeper. And it comes with 2 fans. So if you were planning on buying this and then spending $10 to buy a case fan, you might as well buy the MasterBox 5, which I will link down below to Amazon and Newegg, because it comes with 2 fans and therefore basically saves you the trouble. The other benefit to the MasterBox 5 is it's a little bit larger and you can fit a larger air cooler in it if you want to. The space clearances in this are a little bit tighter. However, I want to use different cases in each of my builds, which is why we're going with the SPEC-01. Finally, we have our power supply, the EVGA 500 watt 80 plus bronze certified power supply, $40. This is a great value for the money. This is a quality certified power supply that has good power efficiency for a very reasonable budget. It has all the connectors you need for all the drives and video cards that you might want to put into a $600 build. Please note, if you do think that you might want to install 2 RX 470 or 480 cards in the future, if you want to go CrossFire with this build, then I would spend $10 more and get the 600B instead of the 500B. The extra 100 watts will give you the margin you need to install 2 of these graphics cards. In theory, the 500 actually should work for all of these parts and 2 of these cards, but it's really close to the margins. You'll have at most 50 spare watts. You'll be running right at the limit of the power supply. If you switch this out for $10 more to the 600B, both linked in the description below, then you will have a 150 watt margin. No worries, you'll be good to go if crossfiring is something you might want to do in the future. So that's the parts overview of everything going into this $600 AMD FX-8300 build. Like this video if you like it, share it with your friends if you loved it. Remember to subscribe to my channel using the big huge red button directly below this video. Questions and comments in the comment section, and as always, check out the video description below. The video description will have links to my individual reviews of various items, including this liquid cooler, the air cooler, the power supply, the case, and more. It will also have links to Amazon and Newegg for all of these parts and everything else I mentioned. Be sure to compare prices between the two because they often have sales, discounts, mail-in rebates, and I want to see you get the very best deal that you can. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.